Hi, this is Pete Thompson. Today we're going to talk about lockout tagout. This is what we're going to talk about today. First of all, we're going to talk about why we lock out and tag out. Second, we're going to talk about the 8 basic steps. We're going to talk a little bit about the energy sources, talk about multiple lockout, a couple things about special procedures, and then just a little bit about training. In industry, about 10% of serious accidents are the result of failure to control energy, which is basically why you have a lockout tagout program. So that's why we're doing this training. We're also doing the training to make sure we comply with the regulations. So OSHA has a regulation. It's called 29 CFR 1910.147. It's called the Control of Hazardous Energy Sources. And it's very often cited when OSHA does inspections. OSHA estimates that about 120 fatalities and 60,000 injuries could be prevented each year if everybody followed these rules. So basically, lockout tagout is one of your best insurance policies against unexpected release of energy. We're going to talk about basically 8 steps for lockout. And this page goes through the whole step, all the steps you need to do. First step, communication. You need to make sure that the people that are working near or could be affected by a lockout know that it's going to be happening. Second step, review the procedure. There should, for any piece of equipment that needs to be locked out, there should be a procedure. Most of them, I think, are hung in the plant next to or close to the pieces of equipment. They also can be found in the office or from a plant manager. Third step is to ID the energy sources. The procedure should have the energy sources in it, but you should verify that all of the energy sources that we'll talk about in a little bit are in the procedure. What are the energy sources? Well, there's a bunch of them. When you think about lockout tagout, you usually think about electrical energy, but there's a whole list of them. We have electrical, we have water that could be a type of energy source, chemical energy, steam, mechanical, hydraulic, gas or other fuels, or pneumatic. Often people miss the one called mechanical, which would be something like a flywheel or some piece of equipment that was up high that could fall down. So take, for example, if you're working on a car and you're underneath that car could fall on you unless you lock it or properly keep it from falling down. Fourth step, shut down the equipment. So once you figured out what the energy sources are, you should be able to shut down the equipment. That's pretty straightforward. Next step is to isolate the energy sources, and that's where you're actually doing the locking and the tagging. So here's some examples. You'll see here just a regular switch on the left-hand side that's locked out. In the middle, if you're working on a car, for example, you would want to isolate the energy of the car falling on you by using a jack or something to keep it up. And then finally, some sort of gizmo here, which would be like a valve or some sort of control device, and it's actually chained so that it doesn't work. So it's isolated. Next step, lock and tag. You'll see a lot of these kinds of things. Typically, you need to have a sign on there that says "Do not operate, lockout, tagout." There's a lock, and then this is what's called a hasp, which is the same thing we saw on the first page, where you can put, for example, if you and your coworker are working together, you could both put your own lock on there, and so then you've got 2 locks on one locking mechanism. Next step. I like chemistry, so this is the answer. It's the acid goes with the base, and you neutralize it. It's called neutralization. Basically, make sure the equipment's not running. Next step is a verification. So then once you have it locked out, you want to push the button or try to operate the equipment to make sure that it's not going to go on. important step. A couple other things on lockout tagout. We have a requirement that the equipment must be standardized, so the locks should be the same type or the same color, and so C1 doesn't match there. Also, your lockout tagout lock or the lockout tagout locks that are available should be used for lockout tagout and shouldn't be used for anything else. So they shouldn't be used to lock a gate or to lock your equipment locker or anything like that. They should only be used for lockout tagout. Also, there are situations where proper lockout requires more than one lock. Hopefully it won't require this many, but there's a couple different ways you can do that. First of all is a hasp. So like we talked about before, if you had 2 or 3 guys working on one piece of equipment and you needed to lock it out, each person can put their lock on there. And so then everybody's got a lock on there. So there's no way that that can be turned on. So if person A and person B decide to go out to lunch and take their lock off, the third person is still protected if their lock is on there. The other option is what's called a lockbox. And in that case, that could be where you have like 5 or 6 different locks that you're putting onto different pieces in say a whole circuit, and you put the locks on the equipment, and then you take the keys for each of these locks and you put them in a lockbox, and then those 3 guys from before, they could put their locks on here, and then you see that this box is locked, those keys are in there, and these locks are on the equipment, so everybody's kept safe. And each person can have their own lock so that they're sure that they are safe. A couple other things on shift change. So if you have people working like from day to day or overnight onto a second shift, you need to make sure you have some continuity between the people. So if the equipment needs to stay locked out, you would, if the guy from day shift is coming off and the guy from night shift is coming on, they would exchange their locks. One guy would take his off, the other guy would put his on. Also, if there is a need for lock removal, so say somebody has a lock on a piece of equipment, they go home at the end of the day, they don't come the next day because they're sick or something, there are provisions to remove that lock. First, you would make sure the guy's not at the plant, make sure he's not there. Second, take what's called reasonable effort to contact the employer. So basically, you could call him or send him a text and let him know that you're taking his lock off. And then make sure that they know that the lock is off before when he comes back and before the work is resumed. One of the things that you do sometimes is jogging. And what that is basically you want to make sure to see if the equipment's working properly, just kind of quickly make sure it's okay. So if you're doing that, you would inspect the area for hazards, make sure everybody's clear before you try it, remove the lock, energize it, just push the start button, make sure it's working properly, and well, conduct your work and then make sure it's working properly. So it's sort of like inside of the lockout tagout, you can do that. And then finally is the end, is the release from lockout. And basically you want to make sure the area is clear. I did have a client who actually left a ladder in a reactor a couple years ago. They didn't inspect the area to make sure everything was okay, and that didn't really work out so well. Also making sure employees are clear, make sure everybody's in the area knows that you're taking your locks and tags off so the equipment might start up. And then finally, after you do these 3 steps, you can take the lock and the tag off. At least annually, we do what's called a periodic inspection. It's done by an authorized employee to make sure that the people that are doing lockout tagout understand what they're supposed to do and are doing it properly. And this is a provision in the OSHA regulation that assures that the lockout tagout procedures are being done properly. And then that gets certified and we keep records of that. And then training and communication, there are authorized employees, which most people in the plant are authorized employees, and they are trained to isolate and control the energy sources. Affected employees is somebody that is in the area that could be affected but isn't actually doing the lockout tagout, and they just need to be aware of what's happening. And then any other employees, like somebody who works in the office or something, should just be staying away. Retraining, we do retraining actually annually, but you're required to do retraining if there are any changes in the equipment or procedures, jobs change, or if we find some sort of shortcoming in the audit. So in summary, that's pretty much it. Why we're doing lockout, protect ourselves, the 8 basic steps, the types of energy sources we talked about, multiple lockout, some of the special practices, and then training and communication. Thanks a lot. If you have any questions, let me know or contact your plant manager. Thank you.